Welcome, everyone. Since it's the top of the hour, we are going to go ahead and dive in. My name is Autumn Noble. I am the founder of the Lawyer Life Collective, where we do life and career coaching for attorneys. I'm also the host of the Lawyer Life podcast. If you're a practicing attorney who's looking for a little bit more balance and peace and maybe looking to make a change in your legal career, the Lawyer Life Collective is truly the place for you. I'm going to go ahead and drop my contact information in the chat so that everybody has that available to them. The plan today is to talk to you for about 45 minutes on this topic of overcoming overwhelm. If you have questions, go ahead and raise your hand or drop them in the chat. Either way is fair game. I'll try and keep up with all of those as we move along. But as I was saying, the plan is to keep you for about 45 minutes. If you stick around for 45 minutes, I have a surprise and a pretty amazing offer for you at the end as well. I swear it's not a gimmick. That sounds really gimmicky, but if you stick around to the end, there's some really good opportunities as well as a gift in it for you as well. So let's go ahead and dive into our topic today. I'm going to share my screen and do it on slides. I know those of you that know me know that I typically use a flow chart with my really horrible art, but I don't know. Today, the flow chart wasn't really working. I thought I was going to collapse midway. So we're going to do an old school, what I think of as old school PowerPoint. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here and we're going to dive in. Okay, give me just 1 minute here. Bear with me. One more switcheroo. Okay, I'm hopeful. And just check and make sure you guys are seeing this right. Oh, still not. Here we go. Okay. We are talking about overcoming overwhelm for good. Since I work with lawyers and I am an attorney, this is a topic that we deal with a lot. I know I even still deal with it personally. So it's a topic that I really enjoy speaking about. For those of you that aren't familiar with the Lawyer Life Collective, this is just a slideshow kind of showing a little bit of what we do. I focus primarily on one-on-one coaching, but I also have a seminar series. The latest series is called How to Lawyer for Real, Everything They Should Have Taught Us in Law School That They Didn't. I also offer self-guided coaching and speaking engagements if your firm is looking for someone to speak on any of the topics that often plague female attorneys. I'm available for that as well. Enough of that, let's get into the topic. Overcoming overwhelm. What I want you to get out of this today is, where does overwhelm come from? How do we dig out of it? And how can we prevent it so that it doesn't continually plague us in our practice? But first, a little story time. When I think about overwhelm, there's just a handful of stories that come up to me from my time in practice. And one in particular it was a Friday night and I was planning on going out with some friends and taking my fiance to meet up with everybody. And it was a Friday where you're sort of thinking, maybe I'm going to get out of here. You're starting to get really hopeful because there's always that anxiety of someone's going to come in and just ruin this for me and it's just never going to work out. And so I was in that space where I was thinking, this is really going to happen. And right as I was kind of planning my exit and wrapping things up, that partner that we all have one in our lives darkens my doorway and drops this project on my plate. And he plays it off like it's not going to be a big deal and it's a great opportunity and, everything they always say. And I'm having this moment where it's like, okay, he wants this yesterday. I'm trying to leave. I have all these things on my to-do list already. This is just not going to work. The second that he leaves, my phone starts blowing up. It's my fiance, and he's asking me about what he's supposed to wear and what we need for groceries and all these ridiculous things. And I'm having this moment where it's like, I can't handle this right now. I just need to deconstruct what happened. And if I can still leave and go spend time with my friends. And then the second I turn around, my paralegal comes in and she's got her own issues that she's struggling with. And she sits down and just kind of starts word vomiting her own issues. So it's like those days where in about 30 to 60 seconds, everything has changed. And I go from feeling like this is going to work and I'm going to get out of here and I'm going to have a weekend and I'm going to have a night and next week is going to be fine, to, oh my God, I don't know if I can do this. I'm about to blow a gasket on everybody. And every time I relate a story like that, I can literally feel myself getting stressed out again, just thinking about it. But this happens all the time in practicing law. So if we're going to figure out, where does this overwhelm come from, we need to kind of deconstruct what happens in those encounters. So we're going to take that as an example and kind of unpack it. So in that instance, what was going through my mind was, I hate this client. I don't want to do this. I don't have time for this. I can't stand working for this partner. I really need a break. I really want to go out with my friends. This is going to be terrible. All of these are pretty common thoughts and reactions when everything just sort of comes together at the wrong time and overwhelms us. And so the first thing we do in coaching is start unpacking, okay, what is going through your head in the moment that you're feeling overwhelmed? And this is my classic response in that type of a scenario. But anyone who coaches with me knows that that first line of discovery is just, it's never enough for me. And so we always challenge that first round of answers with a little bit of so what. And so every thought that I was having, my coach response is, so what? Why does it matter that I don't like this partner? Why does it matter that I don't like this client? The reason that we do that is because our frustrated responses are often a cover for something else that's bigger and more important going on underneath that. And so if we're going to deconstruct that feeling of overwhelm and kind of helplessness, we need to make sure that we really understand what's happening with us before we can start to fix it. So if I take this idea of so what, and I apply it to every thought that I was having in that moment, this is what I get in the pink. I hate this client. Well, so what? They think I'm dumb. Well, so what? Why does that matter? Then there's the thought, maybe they're right. And maybe I'm not good at this. Maybe the client doesn't like me because they see something in me that's wrong. And they know I'm not good enough. And they know I'm not good at this. Then there's the thought, I don't want to do this. And when you ask, so what of that thought, it leads to, well, I should want to do this. I'm a lawyer. This is my job. I should be happy that I have work. And those shoulds feel terrible and they make you feel really guilty for not wanting to do this. And so we're further complicating the matter. Then there's that thought, I don't have time for this. Well, so what? Well, I have a million things to do. Well, so what? I can't get it all done. And then if you keep pushing on that, well, so what? I'm going to miss something. I'm going to blow a deadline. I'm going to do a terrible job and I'm going to get fired. You know, you can just sort of see the thoughts escalate to something more and more significant and more scary. And then there's our thought about the partner. I can't stand working for him. He's always mad at me. I'm going to get fired. Those are way more important thoughts than I can't stand working for him. Those answers to so what really create a lot more tension and a lot more distress, because at the root of that thought, I can't stand working for him, is this worry that he doesn't like working with me. He's going to get fired. He's going to get me fired. He's mad at me. All of that again kind of blows up into a bigger, more dramatic situation. I really need a break. Well, so what? I'm tired. Maybe I don't have what it takes. Maybe there's something wrong with me for needing a break. Maybe I don't have what it takes to make this work long term. This is going to be terrible. And again, when you ask, so what, that devolves into, I'm going to mess it up. It's not going to work out well. I'm going to make a mistake. He's going to be mad at me and he's going to fire me. So you can just kind of see that our first thoughts about these situations when we're feeling overwhelmed, if you unpack them deeper and deeper and deeper, they usually end with us like living in a van down by the river, or living with our parents again, or not practicing law and getting fired and being destitute. They all land in the same place. But that's really just helpful to know that it's not just those surfacey thoughts. There's a lot more going on underneath those thoughts that's creating and leading to this kind of feeling of helplessness. This is important to know when we're thinking about overwhelm and trying to figure out, like, why do I get this way? Why do I feel this way? On the one side of the screen, on the left-hand side, we've got the boss, we've got the email, we've got all the humans in your life, we've got your to-do list. And then on the other side, we have ourselves feeling totally overwhelmed and about ready to rage quit. What's interesting about feeling overwhelmed is that as humans, we want to point to everything on the left side of the screen, the boss, the email, the humans, the to-do list, and we want to say, they're making me overwhelmed. My boss makes me overwhelmed. He stresses me out. My to-do list is stressing me out. My email is stressing me out. But that's impossible. And if you take nothing away from this webinar today, that's what I want you to really hear. It is not possible for your boss, your email, your to-do list, your paralegal to implant those feelings in you, which leaves the only option is that we are actually creating that for ourselves. If other people aren't doing it to us, then we're the only actor that's left, which is both a terrifying thing and a beautiful thing, because if this is really who's causing it, our big, beautiful brain is causing our overwhelm, then that also means that we can use that big, beautiful brain of ours to fix it and stop it. Because the reality of it is, our thoughts create emotions, and those emotions drive our actions. And those actions create everything that we have and don't have in our lives. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, if your emotion is, I'm overwhelmed, whoops, if your feeling is, I'm overwhelmed, we have to look at, okay, what is happening in my brain? If I'm not going to be a victim to all the people around me and blame them for my overwhelm, then I got to start looking at what is happening in my head, because that's the only place it's coming from. And then from there, if the emotion that we don't want to have, we don't want to be overwhelmed, all we have to do is start changing the thoughts. If we want to feel differently about that project or feel differently about the partner, it's on us to decide, well, maybe if I was thinking something other than how much I hate working for him, I'd feel differently about it. And we play around with that. And I'm oversimplifying here, but this is the gist of it. Overwhelm is caused by a cacophony of thoughts and chaos in our brains that we create for ourselves. So, how do we fix it? We start by tackling the 98%. And we're going to talk about what that means. In order to tackle the 98%, the first thing that we have to do is drain the pond. If our brain and our thoughts are what are causing overwhelm, then we need to understand what the heck is happening up there that is creating this feeling for me. Why can't I think straight? And we have to kind of purge it and get it all out. Write it down in your own handwriting, type it up, dictate it up, whatever you have to do. But we want to get it out of our heads and in front of our eyeballs. Because what you'll find is that 98% of what's happening up there is just drama. And what I mean by that is the second step, we drain the pond and then we lawyer it all. And what I mean by that is we separate the facts of what's actually happening in our world from our thoughts about those facts. And a lot of those thoughts are just drama. Usually around 98% of that garbage is just drama, just bad choices, bad stories we tell ourselves, and there's not a lot of facts underneath it supporting it. It's just a lot more exciting to think all of those dramatic thoughts than it is just to focus on the facts of the situation. And I'm going to show you what that looks like. So here's the 98% drama. You can see in the left-hand column, these are all the thoughts that we have kind of unpacked. I have those initial thoughts. I hate this client. I can't stand this partner. And I have those underlying more painful thoughts. Now, if I look at that list and I distill it down to facts, that's what you get on the right-hand side. I've got a client, I've got a project, I've got a partner, and I have certain deadlines, and I have a job. It's not very sexy, it's not very exciting, and it's certainly not dramatic. But what you can see here is like we have these facts, we have these things in our lives, and then we got a lot of thoughts about them and a lot of stories about them. And our brain, once we've started telling ourselves a story a handful of times, our brains are designed to be efficient. When I reach for a pencil, I don't think reach with my right hand. My brain does that automatically. In the same way, when this partner gives you a project and your brain has thought 100 times, I can't stand you, your brain is going to automatically think that every time it comes up because our brains are designed to be efficient. We have created neural pathways around all of these crappy thoughts. And so a lot of times overwhelm happens because we don't even realize that all of these dramatic thoughts are optional. and just stories we've told over and over again so they've become automatic. And so sometimes it does feel like it just happens to us. So part of our work in coaching is to sort of reclaim our agency and recognize, like, look, I've got a lot of dramatic patterns playing out and it creates a lot of overwhelm in my life. Not helpful. How can I deconstruct that? We lawyer it a second time. Because now that we have discovered the 98% problem, which is the drama, and we eradicate it, we've got 98% of space to fill with something else. And that's where our lawyer brains come in and provide us some support, because we can see that the dramatic stories we've had on repeat are not helping. And they're not helping us create the result that we want, because they're not helping us show up, figure out how to handle your to-do list, figure out how to handle the project. They're just helping us spin and not make any progress. So if we recognize that that's what's happening and it's not the result that we want, we can use our lawyer brains to say, okay, if I've got these facts, are there other ways of thinking about it that I believe, which is important, but that might help me show up in a different kind of way that's not overwhelm? And here's some examples of what I came up with. So again, we've got all of these facts on the left, and then we have some new options. And again, it's really important that as you're crafting options, we have to be able to believe this stuff. If you don't believe it, you're not gonna get any emotions from it that will drive you to act in a certain way. So you want to make sure that you're picking new thoughts that are believable to you. The client likes working with me. I mean, the client might be a jerk, but sometimes we have terrible clients that we don't like as humans, but for whatever reason, they like working with us. Maybe that's the case. And that doesn't feel like sunshine and margaritas, but that might help you show up differently in that project with that partner. They keep giving me work. The partner believes in me. If they didn't, they probably wouldn't give you work. I will tell you, when I was a partner, if I didn't believe in an associate, I wouldn't give them work. The partner likes working with me. Again, if they didn't, they wouldn't continue to give you work. I'm happy to have work. We all know how stressful it is to be overwhelmed, but we also know how stressful it is to not have work and to start worrying about all those point ones that we're missing here and there. So we could consider thinking, well, I'm just happy to have work. I'm happy to be busy. These next two are two that I think are super helpful, and a lot of my clients really lean on in their sort of overwhelmed scenarios. I can do hard things. I can figure this out. Again, those thoughts, they're not sunshine and margaritas. They don't feel great, but I think a lot of us as lawyers can believe them. Like, we did something hard to even get where we are. We can do more hard things. We can consider these new projects as an opportunity to learn, something that we can figure out. And also, these last two, I think, are really important. No one has threatened to fire me. It's so often I have clients that come to a coaching session and they'll tell me, well, I can't say no to this guy, he's going to fire me, or I have to work on his projects, because otherwise he's going to fire me. And I say, well, has anyone ever threatened to fire you for anything? And the answer is 99% of the time, no. And so we have to really watch when our brain wants to go there and tell us that it's a likely possibility, when we know there's not a lot of facts to support it typically. And lastly, everything is not a priority. Everything cannot be a priority. When we are in overwhelm, the part of our brain that's driving the bus is our fight or flight primitive brain. That brain will look at everything around you and say, everything is a risk, everything is dangerous, everything is potentially a threat to my safety. So what happens then, that primitive brain will say, oh, I'm getting overwhelmed. I can feel it. I can feel that this is like escalating. Then your brain's like, oh, I need to do that. And that project that's been on my list for a year, I definitely need to do that. That they're probably really mad at me that I haven't said anything about it yet. And it just piles on. And so part of our work in overwhelm is really recognizing not everything is a priority, and just knowing that your primitive brain is going to tell you that everything is, because it's trying to keep you safe. That doesn't mean it's true, and it doesn't mean we have to listen to it. Because the big question at play here is, what is that drama creating? We talked at the beginning about how our thoughts create our emotions, which drive our actions, which create our results in life. If we want to let that drama play around and create overwhelm for us, what does that create? What are the options available to us? Usually that kind of spinning only creates more evidence that you are not doing a good job. It gives people more things to point at and tell you that you're not cut out for it, that this is not going to work out. And so we can see that when we give energy to those dramatic thoughts, what usually it creates for us is the exact opposite result that we're wanting. We create more evidence that we really can't do it and that we aren't good enough. And we give people a lot of reasons to no longer believe in us. And so really underlying all of this is just asking, what are the thoughts that I'm giving energy to? What are they creating for me? Okay, so now we know at this point that we create overwhelm with our thoughts. We can fix it for ourselves by changing our thinking. And we do this by draining the pond and then lawyering it to death. From there, we can start exploring, okay, how do we prevent it from happening so that we don't have to go through that again? One of the things I want you to consider when we think about overwhelm and having too much to do is, what if your to-do list was just a puzzle to be solved? There were solutions available, there were options available. And what if we approached it from that lens? That everything that we're stressing about is just an opportunity for us to sort of strategize and figure out how we can make it work. And it's nothing more. When we look at our to-do list that way, it can be a lot easier to kind of distance ourselves from that overwhelm pull and say, okay, I can figure this out. It's just a to-do list. It's just a problem to be solved. So again, thinking about how we prevent overwhelm, couple of steps. We're going to do that drain the pond exercise, but this time we're going to make sure that we do it regularly. Because yes, we drained the pond. We figured out what was happening in our brain when we were in the middle of overwhelm, and that helped us dig out. But what I'm talking about is, in order to prevent overwhelm and be proactive about it, we need to do this every single week. We sit down and we say, what is on my mind? What am I worrying about in my professional orbit? What's on my professional to-do list? What's on my personal to-do list? And we do this because all of those little nits, all those little to-dos, they're like gnats flying around in your brain, distracting you from whatever it is you're actually trying to work on. And so we get all of those out, like get mom a birthday card, order flowers, find a dress for my cousin's wedding, talk to the paralegal about this project, follow up with this client. We want to write all of that down, because what we want to do is no longer have this stuff bouncing around in our brains, because it makes it nearly impossible to get anything done. It's just drama. So first step is, we're going to create a really long and ugly list of everything bothering you, everything stressing you in your brain. Next, we're going to take that list and we're going to ask ourselves, do we need more facts? Do we need to offer deadlines? Because for everything on that list, we want to have a very clear understanding of when it needs to be done. Because again, when we're in overwhelm, the brain that's driving the bus is going to tell you that everything has to be done and everything is an emergency. And so this step of assigning deadlines to everything on the list is intended to help you get really clear and factual about, okay, does everything actually need to be done today? What are the real deadlines I'm working around? Do I need more facts? Do I need to follow up with the partner or the client and ask? Do I need to offer my own deadline? Thanks for the project. I'll get that back to you in a month, and see what people say. That's an option available to you. But noticing your thinking in this step, because I found that this is the step that a lot of my clients really struggle with, because the second you start challenging deadlines, there's those fears. Oh, the partner's going to be mad. The client really wants this. Really wanting something is not a real deadline. When you're overwhelmed and you have too much on your to-do list, we have to distinguish between real deadlines and like margarita dreams, because we just don't often have time for those when we are completely overloaded. And so we need to, at this stage, get clear on, do I have a lot of real deadlines? Is that why I'm stressed out? or is everything a bunch of fluff? And then we figure out, do I need to do something to help me get more clear on what those deadlines are? Because the next step is going to ask us to prioritize everything on our list. And a helpful question you can ask yourself is, what's the worst case scenario if this project doesn't get done? What's the worst case scenario if this doesn't get done tomorrow? Do I know? Do I need to ask the partner? Do I need to ask the client? Because sometimes we believe that a deadline that was handed to us or given to us is the end all be all. And then you follow up with a client and you follow up with a partner like, oh yeah, actually, I'm not going to be able to look at it for another week. And then you realize it wasn't a real deadline. And so challenging those deadlines and asking what's the worst case scenario if this doesn't get done can help you find room to flex. Other questions to ask yourself when you're prioritizing your list. Is this item my greatest contribution? I recently had a client who was a litigator, and she was really overwhelmed with the brief that she was working on. I'm probably going to butcher this because I'm not a litigator, but there was something with like footnotes that she needed to update across like this massive brief. And when she said that to me, I looked at her and I said, is that really your greatest contribution to this brief? Changing those footers. And she looked at me and was like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm even thinking about doing this. And so we were able to find a way to delegate that to somebody else and let her devote that time to something else that was a higher priority on the list. But that was also the greatest contribution that she could make. And that maybe was one of the greatest contributions that her assistant or her paralegal could make. You know, what a gift, letting everybody make their own greatest contribution to the whole, rather than feeling like we have to do it all on our own. Another question to ask yourself when you're prioritizing, should this be downgraded? And this goes back to kind of that assigning deadlines piece of it. Do we know if the deadline can be downgraded? Have we asked? Have we pushed? Because once we have all of this stuff locked down, we're going to wrap your life around it. And so we need to make sure that we're operating again from facts and not drama. Because even though you're doing this work and you're getting really clear on what's a fact and what's drama, not everybody else is. And so we have to be a little bit on the defensive and making sure that we know truth when we see it. The next step is we're going to go through this list and we're going to supplement it. So for instance, you know, thinking back to my initial example, when I got that project from the partner, the very first step for me was just to sit down and look at it, because I knew I was going to be dreading it and I knew I was going to want to put it off. And so my first step of breaking down that project was spend a half an hour just looking at it. And then maybe the next step was spend a half an hour talking to the paralegal about it or other associates about it. But I really broke it all down into simple steps. Maybe we spend an hour casting a Google net. Maybe we spend an hour doing, you know, secondary resource research. But we break it down into bite-sized chunks so that it doesn't feel so oppressive. We also then add to the list any actions from our prior steps. Maybe as we're moving along, we decided, okay, I need to delegate that project. I need to delegate that. Well, now we've got some more action items. Talk to whomever you're delegating it to. Ask the partner if I can delegate it. Those are more, steps that go on this monster list. And your list will get smaller as you do this every week. But initially, the first time you do it, it might feel like a lot. The next step, we've got this monster list. We're going to go through it and we're going to assign or guesstimate a time for everything on the list. And I'm really stressing to guess. A lot of my clients who are attorneys, you know, really struggle with, well, I'm underestimating how long things take. I'm not giving enough time to the things I'm scheduling. And my message to them is this is an art, and we get better at it the more we do it. And the longer you practice, the easier it's going to be to anticipate that. But I've been practicing for 15 plus years, and I still can't really estimate with 100% accuracy how long things take. You just have to be comfortable enough to guess and then make room to flex later on if you need more time. Because what we're going to do then is once we've got this list and we've got time assigned to all of it, we're going to put it on your calendar. Now, A lot of law firms, everyone has access to everyone's Outlook. And so no one wants to have a calendar full of all of this stuff, half an hour to go talk to the paralegal. They don't want the partners to see it. And I totally get that. What I used to do is have my own Gmail calendar and I would reconcile it with my work calendar. And when I needed to, sometimes I would block off time on my work calendar if I knew I wanted 2 hours to work on a particular project. And so find a way that works for you. But ultimately, our goal is to get everything off of this list, everything that's been stressing us out, weighing us down, taking up space in our brain, and we're going to put it on our calendar. But we do it by starting with those priority projects, which is why the deadlines are so essential. We want to get those on your calendar first and block off time for them. But then we also want to make sure that we add real life stuff and ideal life stuff, because we're lawyers and we tend to be perfectionist overachievers. We forget about this stuff. So it's on the slide because it's so important. If you want to have lunch, if you want to take a half an hour lunch break, put that on your calendar every day. If you're like me and you want quiet time to meditate and read and do yoga in the morning, put that on your calendar. If you want to walk the dogs, put that on your calendar. Do laundry once a week, balance your budget once a week. This sounds overly simplistic, but here's the thing. One of the most painful experiences that I think we deal with as attorneys is like, I don't have time for a life that has any semblance to what I actually want. I have all of these things that I want to do, and I don't have time for it. What we see in this little experiment that we're conducting is that if you want to have time to meditate, do yoga, take a lunch break, walk the dogs, whatever, once you start putting all those chunks for your work on your calendar, you're going to get real clear on what you're choosing instead of those things. And it's going to help you get real clear on what is going to have to give for you to have that life. And then we just have a choice to make. Do I want to push back at work? Do I want to cut back at work? How badly do I really want those things? But it really escalates us from feeling like a victim to feeling like, okay, these are the choices that I'm making instead. Do I want to keep making those choices? And when we have these little things on our calendar, we can move them around. They don't have to be the same time every day, but we get a real clear sense of, where is my time going instead of to the places that I actually want it to go to? Why am I not finding time to walk the dogs or spend time with my kids? This experiment will help you with that. The next step is to take stock. Now that you've started putting these things on your calendar, you are also going to get a wonderful visual display of whether or not it's possible to do everything that you're telling yourself you have to do. And sometimes this is a really painful awakening. We say yes to all these things, but we don't even contemplate, like, is it even humanly possible? Because we know we'll find a way to cram it in, but that's also not who we're wanting to be. And so we have to sort of look at this visual display and say, is it really possible? Is it realistic? Do I need to go back to some of these prior steps and maybe delegate, maybe ask for more support, maybe challenge a deadline, maybe have that conversation like, hey, I've got 50 hours of priority projects on my plate for tomorrow, and really asking like, is there room to flex because this is not an option for me? Lastly, the best thing that you're going to get out of this is when someone asks you, do you have time for a project? You will literally be able to look at your calendar and say yes or no. And you're going to be able to look at your calendar and say, I've got a ton of high priority stuff. The answer is no. I can talk to you in 2 weeks. I've got 80 hours of projects on my list right now. I'll talk to you, next month. But you have clarity and confidence in responding to that question. Because a lot of times, and I know I'm guilty of this as well, when you're a partner and you ask an associate, do you have time for something? You know instantly whether or not they know the real answer to that question. And the second they hesitate, it's not my problem. They expect you to learn how to manage your time appropriately. And this is how we get there. Lastly, honoring commitments. Now you've got all this stuff on your calendar. Your calendar says you're going to take a break for lunch, says you're going to go walk the dogs. It says that you're not going to take any more work because you got 50 hours of priority work tomorrow. Now we have to rise up and say, no more, I'm full, and exercise that full sentence. No, I cannot do that. And here's why. This is what I've got going on this week. And look, this is not easy. It's hard. And a lot of my clients, once they get good at this practice and calendaring and really checking in once a week, they almost use it against themselves to be like hyper productive. And my message to you is find some space in the middle, because what we're trying to do here is keep you from getting overwhelmed and help keep ourselves honest about where our time is going, what we're actually doing during every day. And we can actually answer the question like, gosh, I really want to go to the gym more. Like, why can't I do that? Well, when you work 100 hours a week, it's difficult. So practice, commit to doing this, because we have to really look at why this matters. When we are overwhelmed, we do not create the work that we want. We don't show up the way that we want to, and we often make ridiculous little mistakes, which in turn gives everyone around us more evidence to doubt us, to second guess us, and to be frustrated with us, which all contributes to feeling overwhelmed, and it can make the cycle even worse. And so we have to do this and get clear about our availability, our time, our energy, because to do otherwise is to kind of ride that overwhelmed train in one direction, and that's typically out the door. If we want to show up at our best, we have to protect our time and protect our energy, because it's for everyone's benefit when we do this. And so even though this is a hard practice, boundaries are hard too. I mean, I do a lot of coaching on boundaries, but we have to remember that there is a reason we are doing this. And that reason is more important than the discomfort that will come from setting those boundaries and being clear with people about what you have going on. Okay, so that is the last of the formal slides. If anybody has any questions, you can go ahead and drop those in the chat. I will go ahead and give it a minute and see if anybody has any questions. Okay, I don't see any. Let's see.